All right, haven't done this in a while. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is KarQ. We have hot takes for Overwatch Season 19 edition. Well, some of these takes were probably taken from the previous episode, which was much more than over a week ago, or since the season began. But let's begin nonetheless. Hot take. KarQ's abusable argument on nullifying SR losses for lever games is flawed because 1, you cannot assume that everyone is able to play enough games such that the undeserved losses are statistically insignificant, and 2, the immediate poor experience is not addressed, and this is the important part. Hence, this leads to what? Koji? Did we forget the screenshot of the other half of what this comment was gonna say? Regardless, I think I could still talk about this take. So I think you're referencing to an old take about when someone has a lever on the team, people were saying hot take that you should not get any losses and stuff, and then I said in a video previously that this is abusable because what's stopping somebody from doing with a friend, and if like the game is looking grim, that person leaves, like your person who's boosting you, and then your team gets, you know, a nullified loss or maybe a reduced loss. I think the abusable thing was a big concern for me. Number one, you said you cannot assume everyone is able to play enough games that the undeserved losses are statistically insignificant. Could be true, but now think about it the other way around, where because we're nullifying a loss from this system as well, and if the other team gets a win, because, you know, when you play a game, the enemy team has a lever, you still get the winning points, right? But if they get a nulled loss or a reduced loss, this is inflationary. You're adding points while the other team isn't losing any, or they're losing a reduced amount. Maybe the reduced amount is mathematically okay in a 9-week season where it could be insignificant. I think season 18 or last season or the season before, they actually did add a reduced loss for a lever, if I recall correctly. So this is true, but everyone, like, the counter argument is over time in the long term, it is inflationary. If I'm not mistaken, this is a zero-sum system. So if we're constantly adding points, a lot of the ranks, if it goes on for very long and it is statistically significant, then it will feel pretty bad. We see what people think about systems like Marvel Rivals ranked experience, where everything is very inflationary. With abused systems, people would be climbing with 48% win rates because, you know, the losses are null. You abuse it with the duos and the levers, and then, you know, you're gaining points and other people are not losing points. And then when you pan it all out over a large pool of players, that's what you inevitably or eventually end up. Maybe I'm totally wrong and I'm stupid in my assessment on statistics. I did not pass that. Well, I passed the class, but I got bell curved up in university, and this was 13 years ago. So my knowledge, I'm not very smart. Maybe someone smarter than me can chime in, but based on my understanding, having loss forgiveness, maybe on a very, very small scale of a slight reduced amount, could be okay. And I think that's what Blizzard has seen and is starting to do. They have much smarter people where they maybe look at the math and maybe it's okay. So your second part of this take is that the immediate poor experience is not addressed. Understandably, I think that's what Blizzard is trying to tackle. Like, you're right though, the intangibles or the human experience of, you know, feeling like shit when that happens. How do we make people feel better? By giving them maybe a slight reduction, not a full null loss, maybe that. I'm not a personal fan of that. I don't think we need to baby people on that. I think the system is what it is. People shouldn't be leaving games, period. Sometimes disconnects happens, but that's unfortunate. I feel like over the long run, that should be pretty insignificant, you know, if you play lots of games. But then you also did mention you can't assume everyone's able to play enough games where that one loss is not significant, statistically insignificant. But statistically, how often is a lever happening to you is the better question. Now, there may be some bias in this where people often remember it happening more times than not, but maybe, like, assuming you have great internet and you're not the rage quitter, I actually encourage people to really nail it down. And we can't just have one person do it. You need a pretty good sample size, and you also have to, like, pick your region and stuff like that. Genuinely track how many levers there are where it was not a lever at the last second when the game was lost, but a lever within the first 5-10 minutes on both your team and the enemy team. And I need to know if that's pretty significant or not. And I have a feeling it isn't, because obviously I think Blizzard's overall stats say, like, I think they said in an article it's like 4% levers in quick play. Don't quote me on that. I'm kind of just yapping now, but like that's the only real way to kind of break it down. And I guess I'm only basing this on my experience. Levers don't actually happen that often to me personally. So maybe that's where I'm forming my opinion on these takes. That's my takeaway point on this. Here's a hot take. I think the take that they already tried PvE, so they should focus on PvP, is flawed. And because PvE had a terrible implementation, and was not designed with replayability in mind. Other PvE games have plenty of options to shake up each game to make them feel different, and with the newer systems brought in through Stadium, the devs definitely have an avenue to offer items and loadouts that would give it the replayability the game desperately needs. Also, remove the damn pricing on it and give daily, weekly cycling rewards for it. The problem was that the scope was entirely removed instead of shrunken to a more reasonable yet still fun level. I don't think that take is flawed because they invested all this money and the scope was already bad, the management was poor, and they already burned all that money. What's gonna convince them to be like, let's try that again, but differently? There's like zero chance in the world. So less about it being flawed, but more about it's not realistic at all at this point. You inherited this much risk, and investors and whatever higher up shareholders are going to be like, what the hell was this? Like, there was no turn of profit. There was no end goal in sight. And I think, sunsetting it and cutting things that are not giving you any sort of ROI is just what's going to happen. And it's not even like it was like a short leash. This was many, many years. And I'm sure if they had to redesign the scope and maybe shrunk the scope and made it more reasonable and tried their best with that, that would also retake a long time. Maybe it's still possible, but then they're kind of taking another big risk. But again, they are like not afraid to take big. Stadium was a big risk. They started this 3-4 years ago. PvE scope was started in 2019 and kind of like worked on the side with Stadium. In any case, maybe if they have another injection of budget, but for now, like I say, focus on PvP because this is the proven product that's working and is what still brings people back. And now you're just inheriting risk again to see, will this brand new PvE bring new people or more people in? Has Stadium successfully brought more and new people in? Probably. Is it a significant amount? Not sure. Maybe like some of the player base who already were playing quick play and competitive have moved on to Stadium as a casual mode. But like the best assessment is looking at the overall player base and seeing if that's growing or shrinking or like maintaining itself, but that's, hidden data only available to them. Hot take, the arcade game modes in OpenQ should have stayed 6v6, or at least a dedicated 6v6 mode in the arcade similar to No Limits in 2CP maps. I think a lot of the more casual modes got left behind when switching to Overwatch 2. Much love. I'm always a fan of having extra modes, but Blizzard is not a fan of bloating their game. Like they already just recently sunsetted or closed off Hero Mastery. You guys can't play that mode anymore. They just don't want you to have the paradox of choice where there's too many game modes and it feels too overwhelming. So they kind of just pick and choose certain modes. And I already feel like currently if you open up arcade, there's like 7 options already available to you. When you click quick play, there's 5v5 quick play, 6v6, mystery heroes. There's already a lot of game modes, and you have Stadium as well, Stadium quick play, Stadium competitive. So I feel like when they say they add the No Limits and all the 6v, all that extra modes, maybe queue times would be long, maybe they wouldn't, but like genuinely, if you played on a really obscure region, and this was like these modes were always open, obscure region, or I say that in jest, a region that's not very populated at a very bad time, like some of these queues are never getting filled, and it's easier to just kind of like limit the player base to kind of like cycle through a smaller pool of modes so that you can actually find reasonable games, and especially at a reasonable matchmaking rating, MMR, excuse me, because there is hidden MMR for arcade and quick play and competitive, so it's like SSBM, so you're not just like playing against a brand new newbie. At least you shouldn't be. I understand their logic for it. Next hot take, Stadium Hitscan DPS are generally a bit oppressive, and not only through the auto aim they all somehow get, but also the sheer amount of damage they can throw out without risk. You could make fun ability based builds, but usually the weapon power hit scan just wins by standing somewhere safe and holding down left mouse button. I don't think this is a hot take. I definitely agree that some of the hit scan DPS are really annoying, and especially gets exacerbated with the Mercy pocket. Dude, Mercy Freya, Mercy Sojourn right now, genuinely insane. I was gonna say Mercy Ash, but a lot of the Ashes are not running weapon power. That's the ability power one, but that dynamite build is obnoxious in its own right, chucking 10 gazillion dynamites that do amplified damage. I think people need to build more tank items, but they need a way for you to incentivize you to do it. Obviously you survive, but when you build more damage and you deal damage, you get more cash. If you build tankiness, you don't necessarily gain more money as like a conversion for spending your money onto tankiness. Sure, if you survive, you can make the argument that if you survive longer, you have more uptime for you to potentially generate more money. But you know what I mean? Like building weapon damage and being a hit scan is just a much better recipe to make money than just buying tank items for your first like 3 items. You kind of fall behind on cash really fast if you do that, unfortunately. So I think like Stadium in that sense is pretty flawed. I'm not sure what they could do. Maybe they need like a assist item that can generate cash for you. Kind of like obviously in League, you have like support items that can generate cash in a different way when you're not last hitting. So in the sense, if you are opting to build super tanky on your build, you need a way to reward shielding or assisting your team in different ways, maybe getting assists in a different aspect. They also have this item in Deadlock, because I've been playing that a lot, called Trophy Collector, similar concept. But no, I agree with this take. DPS hit scans are really strong in Stadium. Hot take, high skill ceiling doesn't mean the character should be annoying or overpowered. To many people, making excuses for characters like Sombra, Tracer, and Genji saying skill issue is not a way to excuse bad or annoying character design. One of the bigger issues is people in this game refuse to admit they are wrong about something. I mean, that's just people online in general, and honestly human nature for the most part, even outside of gaming. A lot of people it's hard to admit you're wrong. There's a level of humility there and maturity that's required. So expecting that from people, pretty tough ask, first of all. Second, high skill ceiling doesn't mean the character should be annoying or overpowered. Agreed with that take. Many people make excuses for Sombra, Tracer, and Genji, saying skill issue is not a way to excuse. I think other than Sombra, I think Tracer and Genji are very like well-designed, fun heroes. Okay, I don't think they're bad designs. I think they're a little annoying. Tracer is more annoying, same with Sombra, but like annoying is not the same as necessarily bad per se. It could feel that way, but annoying to a lot of online gamers is anything that inhibits your ability to, you know, maybe respond to them. And usually high movement stuff can trigger this response in a lot of people. Stealth and high movement where some people literally cannot respond to it. So say see like Black Panther from Marvel Rivals. People just cannot deal with fast motion or invisibility. So see Shaco, Evelyn, or Sombra in this game. Any sort of stealth. Now I'm trying to think, are there any high skill ceiling heroes that are not annoying or overpowered? Well, there's lots of them that aren't overpowered, but not annoying? Hard to say. Like Wrecking Ball is very high skill ceiling. He's annoying to play against. I find him annoying to play against. I find it annoying to play against Sombra, Tracer, Genji sometimes. Actually, a lot of times. Widowmaker. Actually, I can list the entire roster, and now I think about it, I think it goes back to my point that what's annoying, despite them being high skill ceiling or not, is just people that kill me. That's what it boils down to. So I don't really know where I'm going with this take. I agree with your first half, but I think what you're trying to say is you feel Sombra, Tracer are overpowered and annoying, and saying skill issue, and they just say skill issue, and then because they don't want their character to change or design, and I don't want them to either. I do think they're very good. You can just slightly nerf them and still keep the high skill ceiling in a different aspect and make their kits express their skill in the similar ways, but with like more diluted numbers or nerfed numbers. Hot take, Ana is the worst designed hero in the game. Beginning with her sleep dart, which is a skill shot, I guess, but it is the longest CC for an ability, and being unable to play the game in a fast-paced shooter like Overwatch is, dude, this is going exactly to the point I just made in the last one. Secondly, her nade is the most broken ability in the game. Healing your allies is fine, but being able to anti your opponents makes no sense. It's the only basic ability in the game which can do that, so she has a monopoly on that. Furthermore, disables two people, supports to a certain degree because they can't heal. So you have to pick specific counters, which should not be the case. Lastly, her ult just does too much. Making someone tankier or do more damage is okay, but when a nano boosted Winston survives a fully charged Orisa ult with half HP, it shouldn't be in the game. Lastly, her character model is the worst. She's one of the hardest supports to hit due to her weird stance. Make her easy to kill and it's somewhat justifiable, but not like she is now and was for the last 9 years. Again, this is going exactly to what I said before. It feels like you are not an Ana player, and it is very frustrating to play against an Ana that sleeps or nades you. But as coming from an Ana player, I find it the opposite. She is actually pretty easy to kill. Like, you have to, if she's caught scoped in at any point, she can die so fast because she has very glaring weaknesses. She has no mobility, and if she's scoped in, she has a loss of peripheral vision, and she has no movement speed on this. So you can just get clipped by tracers or just like shot twice by a Pharah when you're not like paying attention. You're not good. You're not in a good spot. So yeah, I disagree with this take because I think Ana's one of the best designed heroes in the game. She can be annoying to play against, but this goes to the last take where being annoying doesn't mean it's a bad design. You said Sleep Dart. It is a skill shot and it is a long cooldown. The drawback is the long cooldown and it's hard to hit depending on how far or close you are. And it ends up being a sort of a skill matchup, especially if you're playing high mobility, like baiting it out as part of it. Baiting out the two factors, the cooldown, when it's off cooldown, you call it, and then you engage when it's off cooldown. That's part of the hero shooter strategy. Everybody just wants this homogenous, no CC, no inhibit my abilities, and just I can run the game with mobile stuff, and there's no anti-heals and no sleep. Like a fast-paced hero shooter needs some of these necessary evils to kind of like moderate the pacing, or else you just end up getting everybody flying around nonstop if there's 0 CC in the game. You do need a little bit. Okay, so you said healing your allies is fine, being able to anti your opponents makes no sense. Of course it makes sense. Yes, it's the only basic ability at the current time that can do it. Monopoly on that, sure. Furthermore, disables 2 supports to a certain degree if they can't heal. So you have to like play out of line of sight, use natural cover, use other tactics in the game. You have to pick specific counters, not necessarily. You wait it out, you bait it out, you block it with your shield. You call it out when it's on cooldown. You pressure them so that she can't use it aggressively to nade offensively and she has to heal her teammates. There's so many other factors. Like people just dial and narrow into the parts that affect them without thinking in the broader scope. And it just reeks of, I want to say skill issue, but that was the hot take earlier. Don't just say the skill issue, but you know, it kind of is. Anyways, I digress. Let's do one more take. Hot take, Wuyang is an unnecessary support. He is just a combo of Mercy and Ana, but he doesn't do their jobs well and is more difficult to work around as a team than the other supports. Why pick Wuyang when Ana, Kiri, and Mercy are just easier value and much more impactful? Okay, so I've taken my sweet time with this hot takes video. So these screenshots are actually pulled even earlier. It says 5 days ago and the season has just begun 2 days ago. So this was a take from season 18 when Wuyang was too impactful. You said, why pick Wuyang when Ana, Kiri, and Mercy are just easier value and more impactful? Hey, Train, pull up the hero stat screenshot of the mid-season patch of season 18 or even the earlier one. Wuyang was by far the most impactful and much easier value than any of those 3 supports you just listed. People in the lower ranks were actually pulling crazy win rates, which means he's incredibly easy value. The opposite is true when you look at high skill ceiling heroes like Winston and Tracer, who don't perform as well in the lower ranks but do better in the higher ranks. Wuyang was just good at every single rank, which means his baseline value was good and his skill expression was too overtuned, which is why he got nerfed as shit this patch. Losing his HP, losing a ton of the healing. It was needed, but yeah, why pick him? But he does the job very well. I like, there's nothing else to say about this take. He was a very, very cool, unique support, cool aim style, but he was definitely too strong and way too strong. Way stronger than these 3 that you listed. Anyways, that's it for this week's hot takes. Leave some more in the comments and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.